Hey skate builders, today we're going to go ahead and build an electric skateboard using our carbon fiber deck. Some of the tools you will need to build an electric skateboard are going to be a couple Allen keys and a skate tool. To make this job a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and use a ratchet and a drill just to speed the process up. Now, all the components needed are right here. As you can see, it's not going to be that hard. We have the lid to cover up all the electronics when they're on the board. We have a lid for the bottom, which will help us access the ESC a little bit easier. We have a 12S battery and a BMS for that battery. We have a power switch and an extension for the charger itself for the battery. Then we have the remote and receiver, a Bluetooth adapter, the ESC, a couple risers with front and back bump guards, the pulleys for the wheel, pulley for the motor, a big 6374 motor, our motor mount, as well as our truck and wheels. Now the trucks are caliber trucks and the wheels are ABEX style wheels. The caliber trucks will help the mount attach a little bit better, as well as the wheels are going to help out with the pulley style. We're also using an HTD 5M belt. Now, to get started, I like to go ahead and build the board first, attaching the wheels and the trucks, and then work on the inside of the electronics. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. I'm going to put in the bottom lid first. This is going to help out when I start putting the electronics in, they're not going to fall out. Now for all of these screws that you're putting in, you want to go ahead and make sure you're using a little bit of Loctite. This will keep the screw from falling off during riding due to the vibration. Most of the screws on skateboards have little nylon locks, so they won't need any Loctite, but any additional screws will. Now, I'm using slightly larger risers than maybe most people prefer. However, this will help clearance for all the cables that will go through, as well as any speed bumps that you don't want to scratch up your nice carbon fiber deck. Now here's where a ratchet and drill is really going to help out speed this process. You could use the skate tool, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it a little bit easier for myself. Now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and attach our motor mounts. First, we're going to go ahead and attach the motor to the motor mount. Now, you're going to want to set it up in a way where the wires will actually be able to pass through the caliber trucks. This isn't required, however, that's just how I like to set up these boards. Now again, make sure you're using Loctite on any of the screws that don't have a nylon lock. You do not want one of these little screws to come off while you're riding. Make sure they're nice and tight. And now go ahead and remove one of the wheels. Now on the carbon fiber board, there's a cutout for the wires to go through. We want the wheel, the motor, to be on the opposite end of that cutout. So we're going to go ahead and remove our right wheel. This is also going to be our drive wheel. Now pass the wires through the caliper trucks. Make sure that they don't get pinched on anything. And tighten up the mount a little bit. Right now you don't want to tighten it up too much because we still will be adjusting this in the future. Just enough to keep it in place. All right. Now, as I mentioned, will be our drive wheel. We'll go ahead and insert the pulley onto the wheel. And also the front washer. This washer is going to help out for the screws to get aligned just right. Now here on the pulley, it does have cutouts for the nuts, so you don't have to actually hold them down with anything. You can just go ahead and start screwing them into place. Again, you could use your skate tool, but the drill does help out. Now these pulleys are 3D printed, so make sure you're not using too much force. And you want to go ahead and make sure you tighten them in a star pattern, so diagonally. These pulleys also press up against the hub, so they usually come out nice and flat. There's no need to have to readjust them. All right, now that's done. we also want to go ahead and put in our motor pulley. The motors have a keyway on them, so make sure you put that keyway onto the shaft, and the pulley will have also the keyway cut out that will go right over it. Now look for the set screw on that pulley and go ahead and adjust that. Remember to put Loctite on all of these screws. Gonna make a little bit of space here. So now you can see the motor pulley is attached. We'll slip the belt right over that, and we'll go ahead and attach our drive wheel. Now with the drive wheel in place, make sure you spin the wheel and you adjust the mount for it to be perfectly aligned, and that nothing on the mount is actually hitting that pulley, and that the belt is not rubbing up against the wheel. Make sure to spin the motor both ways and adjust for anything changing. Now once you think you have it in the right spot, go ahead and tighten up all these motor mount screws. And again, you're going to be wanting to use Loctite on all of this stuff. If any of this comes loose while riding, it could be a pretty bad day. Now, adjusting this belt, there are 3 screws right here which will let you adjust this motor mount at different distances. Now usually with a belt that's 265, this combination of 16 and 36 teeth pulleys actually comes out just right. Now the main thing you don't want is for the belts to skip when you put force on them. All right? That's pretty good right there. If this was skipping, I would have to undo these 3 screws and go ahead and adjust to a position that's a little bit tighter and go ahead and retighten those screws. Now you don't want the belt too tight because that will cause it to overheat, but you don't want it too loose in case it does slip those belts. Alright, so now with the outside of the board pretty much built, we're going to go ahead and move on to our electronics. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the board over. Now here, we have plenty of space to work with. We're going to go ahead and install our components first. So we have a power switch that's going to go to the BMS. I'm going to go ahead and pass that through. With the carbon fiber board, there's a couple cutouts already in the board for the charger and for the power switch. Just going to go ahead and tighten up the screw. Make sure this is nice and flush. You can pretty much hand tighten these. As long as you're using a little bit of Loctite on all of this, it's not going to come off. And our charger lead. Now we're going to go ahead and put in our 12S battery. Next is our BMS. Now the BMS is what's going to control the battery, keep it nice and balanced. It's not going to go over and under charge. You won't be able to pull up too much currents that will damage this battery. This BMS is made specifically for 12S batteries to go up to 50 amps. And we'll go ahead and adjust that later during our settings setup. Now, you want to go ahead and connect the balance connection first. Then the power connection, and then our power switch. You can give it a quick check by just pressing that switch and making sure the LED comes on. And it looks good. Now, our charger on the BMS is going to go ahead and get connected to this charger extension. The reason for this is that this charger was actually able to get screwed onto the board, and it's water resistant with the rubber plug. Now, moving that to the side of the board. We're going to go ahead and now install our ESC. Now this ESC is based off of Benjamin Vetter's VESC. However, it's a slightly different design. As you can see, it's got 2 PCB boards on it, as well as all the MOSFETs are on one side. Everything is a little bit smaller on this one, so it fits into tighter areas. So now we're going to go ahead and install our Now on the ESC, there's 3 motor wires and then a sensor plug. Sensor motors usually require an adapter to be hooked up onto this ESC. So you want to go ahead and make sure that that's connected. And then hook up your motor wires. The sensor wires next. Now the last few things, you're going to want to make sure you connect your receiver for the remote. The cables are color coded. And this is optional, but it's a Bluetooth adapter, which will allow you to check your battery status, speed, how long you've been riding, all from your phone. So now that everything is connected, you want to go ahead and adjust all your components to be in a nice area of your board. You can go ahead and zip tie some of these things down, but since this is a quick build, I'm not going to go ahead and do that right now. The main thing is you don't want any of the cables to get pinched on the lid itself, and you don't want any of the actual components to be higher than the lid, so you don't want them to get crushed. So you can test this out by running your hand through it, make sure that everything is nice and flat. You can go ahead and put your lid right over it. And again, you can test this out with the lid itself. You can see that the lid actually is nice and flush with the surrounding. Now these screws don't require too much force to put down. If they do, check your wires, because that would mean that there's something poking out. And again, you don't want that. You don't want any of these wires to get pinched or damaged. There is a lot of vibration that goes through these boards while you're riding. And that's it. You've just built an electric skateboard with a carbon fiber deck. Now make sure you look at the next video to see how we set up that ESC so we can actually use this bad boy.